How's it going, everyone? It's been a while since I reviewed an item. Today we're going to review the Cloupor T5, okay? I have the box right here. No unboxings. Unboxings are stupid and it's a waste of time. So we're just going to completely skip that, dive down, and take a look at the device, okay? So let's go. Alright guys, Cloupor T5 over here. So originally I thought that this item was going to be a 26650 mod because when I was shown with this thing, they put a big K-fun on this thing. So I just figured, went hand in hand like that because of, the different kinds of atomizer sizes that it can support. So I stand corrected. This thing is only an 18650 item, right? So also what you should know is that from all the photos out there and different kind of videos, this thing is not exactly round. It's more of an oval. Okay, so when it's lying down on its back, it's really not rolling anywhere. It's just going to be rocking back and forth. So it's really not a big deal that the cable is on the bottom because normally we like to charge things standing up like so. However, with this thing being on its side, it's not going anywhere. It's really not that big of a deal. Okay, so 3 screws over here. Okay, these 3 screws have very, very long threads, so I'm not going to remove it for you, but it houses one 18650 battery over here. Now, that is a little bit disappointing for me. I really wanted this thing to be a 26650, and I'll explain to you guys why later. Okay, so basically this thing works like an ego device. Okay, it's going to fire 5 clicks on, 5 clicks off. It's on right now. Okay, and let's go through the menu right here. Okay, so the top over here tells you exactly how much power you have in percentage-wise, and then on the side there's just a pie chart graph of it. Then it tells you exactly what the wattage is. I think the wattage is still pretty silly to be moving up and down in 0.1 increments. I think it should be more of like a 0.5 because it's really too small of an increment, so that when it auto scrolls, it really still does kind of take forever to get from 50 down to 7, 7 back up to 50. So the next line over here, okay, tells you what the resistance of your atomizer is, followed by the voltage of what it's firing at. The next line is exactly what the temperature reading is, and then at the end is going to be what the puff counter is. The puff counter, very interesting enough, is usually when you decide to, when you fire the atomizer, okay, you need to take about anywhere between a 3 to 4, 5-ish second drag before it'll count as one puff. Now, if you take let's say a second and a half, it will add all of those together so that by the time you're on your third puff, it'll count as one. So depending on the way you puff, this thing is going to count the way that it wants to count. Now, because my puff counter is at 0 right now, I'll go through a little bit of the features with you guys. If you hold down the power button and I'm sorry, I shut it off. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's turn it back on. If you hold down the power button and the up button at the same time, it will reset the puff counter. If you hold down the power button and the bottom button at the same time, it'll go from normal mode over to stealth mode. Now, I think this is little bit unnecessary. Okay, if you guys don't know what stealth mode is basically, it means that when you fire it, you will hear it fire. However, the lights don't come on. But it's because this item is so dim, I don't really see a really need for to go into stealth mode unless you're seriously trying to conserve your batteries or something like that. Okay, so what we should know about this thing, the highest voltage cutoff is 9.3 on this device. I'll take you guys over to the Cloupor website later, and then we'll double and confirm that. So right now over here I have a 2.6 atomizer. So when we crank this thing up all the way, it's going to cut off at 9.3. See that? It says 9.3. Okay, so if we put this into the Ohm's law calculator, right, 9.3 is something more like 33 watts, which basically means that if I built a 2.6 atomizer, this thing, as I crank anything higher than from 33.2-ish all the way to 50, it's all going to fire 9.3. See that? Okay, if I crank this down just a little bit, like 32.9, there you go. One more down, 9.2. 32.8 gives me 9.2. See that? So anywhere from this point on is really not going to give me any more power. All right. Now, I'm going to give you the rest of my final thoughts and my professional insight over at the top screen. Okay, so let's come up back. All right, guys. So here we are over at the Cloupor website, and it says over here, okay, the output voltage from 2 volts to 9.3 volts. Okay, so this is confirmed all the way up to 9.3 volts that it can fire at. So what do I why do I make a big deal out of this? Well, if you missed the episode where I spoke about getting the most out of your regulated devices, okay, so what I said over here is that many people take for granted of what things can fire at. Just because you could fire something all the way down to zero point 0.2 ohms doesn't mean that you actually should build things at 0.2 ohms. In fact, what we should do is actually try to discover what the sweet spot of a device is. Okay, so for this device, the maximum voltage was 9.3, and we could crank the power up all the way to 50 watts. So when we calculate on the Ohm's law calculator over here, we're going to get 1.7 ohms. All right, so building your resistance somewhere around 1.7 ohms in your atomizer is going to be the sweet spot for this device. Now, some of you might go over to Steam Engine over here and then toggle with, like, you know, the Cloupor T5, et cetera, over here, right? And then they will tell you over here that the sweet spot is 1.33. That is because our definitions of the sweet spot is a little bit different. See, they want to use 1.33 just to back it off a little bit so that it's not as intense. So my idea of the sweet spot is actually the maximum resistance. So if you check out what the maximum power for 50 over here is 1.73, which is exactly what, you know, my 1.729 calculation is. So we do end up coming to the same numbers. It's just that we describe it differently. I think the maximum is the sweet spot. They think the sweet spot is, you know, a little bit backed off a little bit, right? And what I'm talking about is the maximum. So, all right, with these two things out of the way, okay, what do I really want to talk about regarding this item? I feel as if this item, okay, although it's very nice, it could have been better in a couple of ways. For instance, right, one guy that I think is way ahead of his time as far as the design, either he's ahead of his time or his timing is perfect, you know what I mean, would be Mojo. Now, Mojo came out with like the Chiyu Megan, the 318, right? And what I want to show you guys is a couple of photos regarding the Megan. Now, if you look at this cap over here, okay, this cap is for 22 millimeter devices. And what happens is that, like, this is a Chiyu Megan with the 22 millimeter and then a nucleus sitting on top of it. So I felt as if, like, the Cloupor over here could have taken a page out of Mojo's book and added an additional adapter of some sort, because even though the item is oval on its body on the outside, but the deck over here is still circular. So they could have added some kind of adapter or whatnot to get a more 22 millimeter flush fitting thing, because as we all know, you know, the 22 millimeter has basically one as the standard size for, like, you know, most 18650 etc devices. So the other thing that they could have done is that they could have made a trap door type of battery release at the bottom so that, like, you could quickly swap between batteries because you're only supporting an 18650. See, what I want to talk about over here, okay, is that you guys know that the eFest makes a 20 amp battery, right? So, like, eFest 20 amp, okay. So eFest 20 amp batteries over here, they have what was the milliamps on it, like 3,100 or something like that. The point is that, like, it's a larger battery life, and then 20 amps, right? See, when we put into the Ohm's law calculator, okay, and then we go the 9.3, and then we go with the 50 watts over here, and then we calculate the current over here that's going to be used is 5.3, et cetera, whatever, right? Which means that, like, a 20 amp battery over here is going to be more than enough to accommodate this kind of power. So we don't need to use like, hardcore BTC batteries. We don't need, 30 amps, 40 amps, 35 amps, etc., whatever. We could go ahead and back down the amperage a little bit to get more milliamp hours, because once you've already cranked it up to like your maximum sweet spot, like whatever, then why don't we just get more milliamp hours, or why don't we get more life out of the battery? Like, look, we don't need more amps. You see what I'm saying? Because we're not going about this in that mechanical fashion anymore. So it would have been so much better that, if we were using the larger 26650 batteries, like this one over here, like a VAP power or something like that, max 20 amp, pulse 30, this is well within the parameters, and then we get 5,200 milliamp hours. You know what I mean? So rocking a Cloupor T5 with 5,200 milliamp hours in there, way better. It's like what else could you ask for? This would have been like the ultimate device, So until that comes out, right, that we could crank up so high and supports the 26650, we'll see. And then the other thing that I was talking about is that, like, maybe we could have like some kind of cap over here, so that, like, 22 millimeter different kinds of drippers and K-funds and stuff like that could have a better flush looking feel to it, right? So that, like, everything just looks like it connects and belongs together. The last thing that I want to point out regarding regulated devices or whatever, right, is that why you should switch over to the regulated device as opposed to mechanical devices these days. Okay, although mechanical devices are very good, it depends, it also has its own pros. Okay, but the biggest pro about regulated devices, okay, is about the way the performance and the heat works. For instance, right, there are many ways to get all the way up to 50 watts worth of heat, but it depends how quickly we're going to get there. Now, using a regulated device, you're going to jolt in 9.3 volts worth of electricity. So that's going to shoot that coil into 50 watts immediately. So what happens is that, like, you get to enjoy that performance, you get to enjoy, the juice cooking immediately, that dense vapor, everything's coming out before the heat spreads into the device. As opposed to when you see like all those cloud chasing competitions of people using like Manhattan mods, etc., whatever, that people are wrapping towels around their device because there's so much heat spread into the device, into the battery is swollen. You know what I mean? Instead, you could have, this kind of instant performance that's going to produce that instant dense vapor, so that, like, you chain vape a couple of times with a mechanical setup, that thing is going to get hot as hell. You do the same thing with a regulated device, you could still put the atomizer over to your face and it will still feel pretty cool. So that's going to allow you to go on longer if you're the type of person who's going to be vaping and vaping and vaping and vaping all day, So that's a definite pro that guys should consider. So that's it for my review on this one, guys. So as always, question everything, do your homework, and take care.